like, oh, you should try this. Yeah, we're doing that. Oh, you should make sure you do this. Yeah, we're doing that. So it's good.
We've done that.
Yeah, exactly. So, just another testament to how great our staff is, and specifically Mark and his focus and his vision for the city is, we give that vision and he helps put that forward and trying to do the best we can for our residents. So it was good. It was kind of interesting. A little long. It could have been a little shorter, but.
The first hour and a half was touchy-feely, huggy stuff, and it was.
Oh, you love that.
It was terrible.
Yeah, they wanted us to share like, a personal thing that we did this year or whatever, and also it was kind of, anyway, whatever. But yeah, so I think overall, the goal will be good and as they get going. The biggest thing is it's a recognition of the fact that in order to get some of this funding from the state especially, we really need to band together as North cities, in order to get funding from the state for bigger projects that we're going to need as we plan for potential east-west freeways and for Pony Express extensions and things like that. So it was good.
Okay, Councilman Wilden.
That was so much better than what I was going to say. I was just going to say I went to Mag and Cog and call it good. No, but I did go with Councilwoman Barch and the mayor, because Councilwoman Barch is obviously going to be phasing out. But just thank you for what you've done there. Obviously, Mayor, but Councilwoman Barch, she'd introduced me to people. They ignored me and said, "I'm so sad you're leaving." But a lot of great things going on there. So I'll do my best to fill her shoes and support the mayor.
Do you want the higher heels or the lower heels?
I like the high heels, so size 12. But that's all I had, Mayor.
Councilman Podeska.
Yeah, I always have to follow that. It's great. Mic's off. There we go. No, I'm not going there. Thanks. I guess just a couple items. Going through the election process as fun. But the highlight part of it was just meeting with residents and hearing the feedback of having those conversations. And kind of as we approach a new year, just something to consider and think about is how can we continue to have those and not once every 2 years when we have an election, to try to have more engagement, not having the responsibility that they come to these meetings, but having that more engagement outside of city council meetings. So, and then just wanted to pay respects to Carrot and her family that lost a good person recently, and she was great for the city.
Her level of detail and focus and passion for this city and what she's done to help Saratoga Springs in the last 8 years will go on for a very long time. So thank you.
Councilman Porter.
Well, geez, everybody's getting mushy on me. The only thing I had was with many of the members of council, I attended Mark's quarterly sewer briefing to the Alpine School District. But it was a good meeting with the Alpine School District. We discussed a lot of issues of mutual concern, as well as their, I had some discussions after the meeting with some of the board members regarding their concerns about funding and stuff like that. So it was I think it's good, and I'm glad that we're continuing to have those meetings.
Okay, I attended North Point Solid Waste Board meeting last night, and they pointed out that we've been able to keep our
I've seen one permit.
Do they do it?
Other providers and things, and so it's a little bit tricky, and we're working on that. There's also, we're curious to see what's going to start to happen with the small cell tower. We haven't seen any applications on that yet, but there's certainly, provisions for that in our code that we've already made. So I think that, there is definitely the challenges of cell coverage. We have a provider that's currently talking with us that would like multiple sites across the city. We're going to have some conversations about,
The properties down Pinnacle. So I'm open to exploring that, just putting road base or something. As far as Pinnacle, it's not really, I mean, I'm okay if we want to move it, have it continue south, but it's not really a north-south, I mean, it doesn't go north of, it's a big U inside my neighborhood.
But it connects into your main road.
Yes, it does. So.
That's another way out.
It would be, if we could continue it south to Pony, then it would, it would provide another way.
All the way to Pony, it would go at least to Fairfield.
Okay.
Because of.
It does, I mean, it does tap into Evans, so you could theoretically get out that way. But I'm, I don't feel strongly either way, I guess.
Is there, as you're looking, and this is maybe a question for Gordon, Gordon, as you're looking at the transportation plan and the road that 1800 or 118th, sorry, west right there, there's no way for that to go south, and there's no way for it to go north, right? So that's not really a good connection there. So Pinnacle would be really the only place you could connect truly north-south.
Does the transportation master plan envision a
to
north-south
the
route
west.
through that area?
Well, let me clarify Councilmember Barch's comment first. You said there's no way for it to go south?
118th.
It does go south.
Well,
kinda
no, it swings out
curves.
swings out to the east.
Yeah. Dave, do you mind pulling up the?
Yeah, there's a
map?
tight little S-curve there. It swings out to the east and then back to the south and ties into Fairfield Road.
It does tie into Fairfield.
Uh-huh.
So there's a connection there.
I was gonna say, we don't. Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Can you zoom in a little bit? The lines are pretty
Chris needs
faint.
glasses.
I do need glasses. One time my wife has said that.
There's the Pinnacle cul-de-sac.
Okay.
And that, it comes in.
So yeah, there's that 90-degree turn there almost where it goes to Fairfield Road.
Will that eventually head straight east to?
Will it tie into-
Seems logical. We
I
don't,
mean, because
we don't have
I
a
see a
street.
90-degree corner. That's a little odd. I mean, I know right now it's a farm road and, it follows fence lines and whatever else. So we could possibly, okay. So,
Yeah, it makes
maybe-
sense that it would. We haven't seen any street plans for that area to the east. but-
Okay. So I guess if, you don't want to punch through on Pinnacle, then there could be, we just need to make sure that we're keeping that future connection in mind as we're looking at those incoming projects. I don't know. Be quiet. He keeps going, you're not going to be here, you don't.
We're just dealing with some very challenging land issues down there. And so I don't disagree at all with what your intent is, but it's dealing with property owners that would likely not be supportive of some of those changes.
Eventually, though, so if we have it, I mean, eventually their kids will sell their property.
Potentially, yes,
I mean,
that's a
it happens,
possibility.
right?
Well, but to that point, though, there is a road that does connect down to Fairfield.
Okay.
I agree that we want to maintain that north-south connectivity. I'm just not
Yeah.
sure if Pinnacle's.
I think it
I
think it does.
I didn't know that it.
I didn't realize it did that either. I thought it went east and tied in, so that's not bad then.
Okay, Councilman McComber,
My comment was because of the road situation changes.
perfect. Okay, any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Wilden?
Was motioning.
Okay, entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve business item 1, including all staff findings and conditions.
Second.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden, a second from Councilman Porter. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilman Porter?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Podeska?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 2, the Saratoga Springs Commercial Plat D Preliminary Plat, Utah Valley Turf Farms LLC.
Mayor and Council, this is a request for a commercial subdivision located in the RC zone at 135 West Crossroads, approximately 6.38 acres. Very straightforward, a 6-lot subdivision. This would be just directly east of Taco Bell. And the corner vacant parcel you see there came in on an earlier subdivision. That is the location of a future KFC, which we actually have the concept plan in now. We're reviewing for that.
That's what I just asked.
Is it KFC A&W combo?
No, just KFC. But right now, it's a bright red building, so, you know.
I like the frosted mug.
And the Planning Commission recommends approval with the findings and conditions.
Okay. Any comments, or I'll entertain a motion? Councilman Podeska?
I just have a question with the road that splits the 6 lots.
And that's private, and it will not connect. There's an island in Crossroads right there now, so that,
Yeah.
it lines up, I believe, with a Walmart, but since there's an island there, it's right in, right out.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if we're maintaining it right in, right out
Yeah.
for that. Okay.
All right. I have one quick comment that you should encourage them to get the frosty mug, even if it's just going to be KFC. And then I move to
I'll
approve
make that a
the
condition of
Saratoga
approval.
Springs Commercial Plat D, Plat Utah Valley Turf Farms LLC, business item 2.
I second that full motion.
Okay. I have a first from Councilman Porter, including the request to encourage frosty mugs, and a second by Councilman McComber.
Oh, man.
Any further discussion?
She's wondering if she really needs to include
Don't
that.
actually put that in
Don't
there.
really put that in there.
She looked
She knows
completely
us,
confused.
she knows us well enough.
Like, do I put this in?
And she's also not going to include your earlier comments about pizza either.
Thank you.
Podeska?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Let's keep this pace. Moderate income housing plan, general amendment, city initiated.
Recent state law, well, the cities have for some time been required to have a moderate income housing plan. With Senate Bill 34, the last legislative session, additional requirements were placed on local jurisdictions. So cities, 10,000 people or greater population, we need to provide a 5-year plan. This report then goes to the Housing and Community Development Department or division of the state, and also the local government group, which in this case is MAG, obviously. We did contract with Zions Bank to pull all this information together for us, and they're here tonight. I'll jump here, we've got a presentation they'll go through. The report is due December 1st, 2019, and then biennially, and then on the off years, we also provide an update on that. The moderate income housing plan is part of the general plan. It is one of the 3 required elements of the general plan at minimum. We have to have a housing element, a transportation element, and a land use element. And so this would be an amendment to the general plan. It would supersede the plan that was approved with the general plan that was adopted in 2017. Public hearing was at the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission does recommend approval of the moderate income housing plan. And I'll jump here, pull up the presentation. We'll have Zions Bank then come to the front desk and present that for us.
Good night. Yeah, it's late. Mayor and council members, I'm Aaron Montgomery. I'm with Science Public Finance. Thank you. We'll go through this. So the moderate income housing, what that means is housing occupied or reserved for occupancy by households with a gross household income equal to or less than 80% of the median gross income for households of the same size in the county in which the housing is located. I would add that this is as defined by Senate Bill 34, and that the 80% that it's talking about, which we'll get into a little bit more, is set by HUD. That's the Housing and Urban Development as federal department, national. We'll go through the demographics, median incomes. As you can see here, Saratoga Springs median income, according to the 2017 ACS American Community Survey produced by the U.S. Census Bureau, puts Saratoga Springs median household income at $88,804, The Utah County median household income is $67,042. Some notable other household incomes median are Alpine at $112,000 and Highland at $128,000 roughly. Those were brought up in the Planning Commission, those specific cities, in regards to how they're pulling their weight. Median age in Saratoga Springs is 21.4. These pyramids represent the age with the under 5 years at the bottom and 85 years and over at the top. Saratoga Springs is on the left. As you can see, it does not look very much like Utah County. It has a little bit, there's a lot of weight in the 30 to 40 year range and a lot of weight in the under 15 year range. So the households here are pretty consistent. And that's where you get your 21.4 median age from. Well, meanwhile, the county's median age is 24.5 and the state's is 30.5. This is the building permits per year. As you can see, that's been quite a lot in the last several years. I'm sure that's no surprise. 2019 is through October 2019. Those numbers will probably be similar to the last 3 years. This is sourced to the Salt Lake Tribune. This is home prices. It's the historic median sales price, both since 2013 to 2019, is that what is affordable this year may not be affordable next year. Housing prices continue to increase, and it's something that needs to be at least thought about as you continue to plan your future. This is a map that indicates the market value of residential parcels in Saratoga Springs. You guys have a very long city, so I had to, hopefully that makes sense. I labeled it. So on the left you have the north and on the right you have the south. For the affordable housing, what you'll see is that most of those are going to end up being what's orange and red. So you can see those, how they fill in with this. This is the affordable housing. Sorry, they're kind of small, but there's a lot grouped up in the north. I'll try and point, that's not gonna help. In the northern part of the city, and some spread through the southern part, but not quite as uniform as you find in the north. Affordable housing, the affordability comparison. This is showing Saratoga Springs. The way you find this ratio is by taking the median home value and dividing it by the median income. So as you can see, Saratoga Springs is at 4.1. That means regularly it takes about 4 years of median income to buy a median house in Saratoga Springs. That is higher than the state, but just a bit lower than the county. And it's much lower than other comparables, other cities outside of the state, especially San Francisco. They're doing a lot better than they are. I don't think so. Okay, so this is kind of the meat of the important stuff. This is HUD's area median income, AMI. On the right, you'll see 80% of AMI with 4-person household is 63,700. So these are the standards that have been used to determine affordability. And so by using these, we have determined the monthly housing allowance by those same standards. For monthly housing allowance, including utilities, the affordability standard is set at $1,593. If we look at those as it pertains to mortgage rates and housing prices, at a 4% mortgage, the 80% limit would be $261,665 for a home to be considered affordable. And these other mortgages are to show you potentials of where that might end up in the future if mortgage rates ever do go back up. And also there's a household income range to give you an idea of what your household could afford if based on their income range. So this is what that means. These are just showing kind of the comparison there. You have the mortgage price on the left and the monthly rent on the right on that top table for affordability summary. And then on the bottom, you have your total affordability units in Saratoga Springs. That total is 2,131, with the proportion based on the countywide income distribution, estimating that the need is 2,823, leaving a shortage of 692.
Can I make a comment on that? Some of these numbers, and it's unfortunate because there's not much you can do about it, but some of these numbers are really deceiving because there are many, many condos, townhomes, houses, apartments in our city that are being rented out in a roommate type situation. I can name a dozen in my neighborhood. And so in reality, they are meeting that affordable housing, but it's not something you can track and record. So this is a little deceiving. So I just wanted to say that because it's not like we don't have any affordable housing. We do, and there are opportunities. It's just not trackable. And the state doesn't look at that, and the legislature doesn't care. And it's really frustrating because we also can't control, and again, this isn't, it is what it is, but we can't control what developers decide to build. So as we're looking at this, we can put aside land, and we've got how many thousand acres left? 2,500 acres left in the middle of the city that has got some pretty high densities in it as possibilities. But we can't control if a developer's going to come in and build luxury apartments and condos, or if they're going to build affordable housing. So anyway, just a comment, and I realize it's not anything, I mean, your report it is what it is. It's not something you can track, and it's not something that we can control. So we try to work on this, but just know that the numbers are a little deceiving.
So,
And it's not, like I said, nothing you can do about it.
and I completely agree with what you're saying. And we do have an incredible amount of housing product that is vested that will fill a lot of these categories. And so I think that's kind of the intent of what the study says is as a young community, we have the opportunity to grow into it. And then I think astutely, the study also lays out some things that we can look towards as we continue to develop. And again, we're meeting the standard that was required by the legislative change. And the question is if we can employ some of these other tools in the future and look for ways that we can, kind of focus on these types of opportunities, that keeps us moving in the right direction. And again, based on what's built, yeah, the numbers are what they are. We can't go back and change the past, but we can certainly look towards the future and kind of embrace those things as a community that we feel are appropriate.
Yeah.
And use those tools then to try and, help, fill the gaps that may exist in our housing study.
Well, and it's kind of interesting too, as you look at it, because in reality, if you look at just smaller houses, higher densities, whatever else, you look at San Francisco, and that does not make for affordable housing, right? You've got one of the most dense cities in the United States, and it's far from affordable. People are fleeing California, like by the droves. So it's kind of interesting to see the dichotomy there between the reality and what we're trying for. So, yeah, it's hard. Go for it.
Yeah. All right, so this just shows kind of a summary of that. On the left, this gives you an idea of, obviously on the right, we talked about Utah County's proportion. That's kind of what the state wants us to look at, and HUD is based on the county proportion. So that's showing you if we distribute the households based on that proportion, what it is. And on the left gives you an idea of the city. But as we pointed out in the beginning, the city does have a higher median income. So there might be less households that fall under that needing affordability, but that doesn't take into account the county's, what that might have effect on other people outside of the city looking to move into Saratoga Springs.
Good evening. This is fun being back here in front of all of you. My name's Mike Cathorn. I'm with Community One. I was hired as a sub-consultant to work on the implementation recommendations for the moderate income housing report for you. The starting point for this, I think, is to understand what Senate Bill 34 actually requires in terms of implementation. They gave, within the bill, they gave a laundry list of 23 different objectives that communities could look at in terms of implementation. And based on the age of your city, there's a lot of those that simply don't fit. If you've had the good fortune of reading the bill, that was something that you probably noticed, because it talked about things in terms of recapture and renovating older housing stock and so forth. You're a much newer city, so your strategy has to be very different. The list that's on the screen here there is an error. I listed one that is not part of the objectives that were set forth by your staff. What was reflected to us were A, E, and G. F was not part of that. I put that on there erroneously, and I apologize for that. I think it's important to understand where you've set your bar as it pertains to coming up with strategies for implementing for moderate income housing. And what I tried to do was be reflective of the objectives that you've identified, and in the recommendations that we put forward as potential implementation strategies was to look at how to create a multiplying factor with the strategies that could be brought forward. So if we go to the recommended implementation strategies on the next slide, there were 5 that were given, and strategically there's an opportunity, like I mentioned, for these to multiply on top of each other if utilized comprehensively. First recommendation in terms of modifying zoning requirements, I think it's important to note that zoning in and of itself is, in essence, DNA. And so the degree to which you have opportunities of implementing moderate income housing strategies that fit within the context of different housing types that simply are not available in your community because your zoning prohibits them, there's opportunities to look at expanding the palette, so to say, so that not only are you providing for more housing types, but secondarily looking for opportunities to diversify and have those housing types work collaboratively within neighborhoods. You've taken and the report mentions this, your city has taken in my opinion, a baby step as it pertains to your mixed residential zone. I think there's opportunity to potentially go a little bit further in terms of what that actually does and what it emits when it's implemented. In doing that, you're looking at, in essence, the opportunity with number 2 of expanding opportunities for market choices. One of the other avenues that we took in this relative to the recommendations was realizing that across this country, municipalities are taking one of 2 paths and sometimes both as it pertains to solutions. We chose to take a path that was more based on what the private market can produce as opposed to public subsidies. We felt that was a more responsible approach to take, and one that is more conducive to the nature of Saratoga Springs. So to be able to do that, you've got to have the toolkit that will allow for those market-based choices to be made available. The low-hanging fruit on that is number 3, and that's legalizing accessory units. And again, you've taken a baby step in terms of allowing for them in Beacon Point, but the question is, can you go further? We made some recommendations based on the types of of accessory units that could potentially be made available through the city. And it's simply a matter of character and culture as to whether you limit it just to new construction or you look at allowing for accessory units in existing neighborhoods. It's a much more nuanced approach if you have to deal with existing neighborhoods because you're shoehorning something in that the neighborhood may not be conducive to. But nonetheless, accessory units in my opinion, it's hidden density. And you're allowing for a housing type to exist in a very incremental fashion and allowing it to be feathered based on a consumer saying, yeah, I want to put one of those on my lot. And, there are the instances where they're not used for housing. They're used for home office space, or they're used for boomerang children that come back and live at home again, and allowing for a level of privacy. But it's a great solution as it pertains to this issue because it provides an affordability level that is frankly hard to beat in other scenarios, while simultaneously allowing for a single person or a couple that might inhabit one of those accessory units to embed in a neighborhood that they might otherwise not have access to because they simply can't afford to be there. So it's something that I think you'd want to take a heavy look at.
Michael?
Excuse me, I was going to just jump in real quick, and I think the council's already embraced the fact that across the rest of SLR's property, that is a tool that's available. I think the political nuance, which you're alluding to, is how far they want to go back into existing neighborhoods of that nature.
Yep.
And that's a decision that's going to have to be made at a much later time.
Absolutely.
We understand the recommendation, and we've talked about what are the impacts with parking and with CC&Rs and other neighborhoods. And so I think we've already kind of put some thought and discussion into this. We do have, though, the remainder of SLR's property with just, still a few thousand acres that we think will help to capture a lot of that particular product. And so there's those opportunities that we're
Potentially.
continuing. Potentially.
Yes, potentially. We'll put the little caveat in there.
And I'll accept your asterisks. And again, we're going to have to punt on that one until we get future plans.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that you don't want to, you absolutely don't want to be passive in that. I think it's going to be important that you're proactive in terms of setting the table, albeit PRI and SLR have their zoning, they have a set of entitlements, but as we all in this room know, their zoning is a bit of a bag of hot air as it pertains to what they can actually deliver. So there's still room to talk and negotiate and set plans, and ideally you're dealing with an organization that would have a sensitivity to these type of issues at the right level.
And again, we'll have to address that as applications become available to us. But to that point, though, there is still a huge portion of the city that has this available to it within its toolkit.
Great opportunity.
So I understand the state code that you must choose at least 3 of the areas. And the 3 that were recommended by staff, and I think they're covered in your 5 here, I personally, it's an unfunded mandate by the state to even have to do this study and have to pay for it. If they really thought this was important, they should have funded all of the cities to run this in their cities to figure out where they need to be. And 2, I personally will do 3. We're a young city, we're new, there's no need to exceed the requirement. It's at least 3. And so, again, for me personally, most of this stuff is more applicable to cities that have a lot of mass transit. We can barely get UDOT to put a bus route through our city. We have 1, we're trying to get them to even try and do 2. So much of this is about development around mass transit, parking requirements. The reason why our income is different is because people aren't using mass transit. They're not that's not the type of demographic that's here. And it's going to take a while for that demographic to work this way. We don't even have a freeway. We have a frontage road of one, and that covers this teeny amount of the city. So for me, I think the three areas that we recommend, that staff, you have them included in here, E and G make sense for our city, and I feel like we've gone above and beyond, and we actually had a conversation this morning, or I had a conversation this morning, but then also earlier today, we talked about another development that we're looking to allow them to have higher densities closer to what would be the Mountain View Corridor Freeway as part of encouraging higher density or moderate income residential development near major transit with the DAI property.
Well-
So we're constantly looking at this.
Well, and again, we're planning ahead, we're trying to do these kinds of things, and I think that that's kind of what Michael and I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Aaron are kind of pointing to, and we're doing that, but it's hard because the state says, do it now. I mean, they're not really saying do it now yet, they probably will this legislative session. But as we're doing this, we're planning for it, but then again, we're doing it on the market, along the market plan. We're not going to subsidize that because it's not appropriate for us to take, other taxpayer monies and then pay for somebody else's housing. So we do want to do that along the market levels. But the market out here isn't moderate and low-income housing. The market out here is higher because there isn't the transit, there aren't the job centers yet. And we're working toward that, we're planning for that.
But with North Shore, we
plan for
we
it.
had the mass transit.
It's
we
a
put the-
step.
Yeah.
It's a
The
step.
thing is, we can't, she's walked out now, I can't force her, this is still a free country, I can't force DII to put in the apartments, DR Horton to put apartments above the businesses next to the mass transit. I can give her those densities, I can allow that. I went against residents' wishes to allow higher density. I want Lehigh residents coming here yelling at me because they say we're trying to dump it on their doorstep. So we did. We actually had Lehigh residents. We actually had, we've had.
Long run, it's up to you as a council to select a planning commission and to set your policies and ordinances and things of that nature. And again, these are recommendations for us to just consider as we continue forward.
Okay.
And again, we're not recommending, and staff and the consultants aren't recommending that we go in there and force some of these things into our community. They're saying these are tools that we ought to consider as we continue forward in meeting the state's requirements.
In terms of affordable housing. Something that is frankly not in character with Saratoga Springs. So if you can look at it strategically from the standpoint of being able to potentially deliver affordable housing options in a fashion that's market-based and in a fashion that does not concentrate it, that's going to be critical, an opportunity to feather throughout your community. Having neighborhoods that are
was a major issue at the legislature. It's going to be it again and again and again. And, they talked last year about potentially tying funding and road projects and other things to whether or not we meet these standards. Jake sponsored this bill, Jake Andrag, and he kept it limited to a few, and he gave us the option of choosing what we're going to do. It's very realistic that in the future, they could take away that choice. They could mandate it, and they could say, okay, you've got to meet 50% of these. And we are trying as communities and cities and towns and counties in the state to say, give us the options. We'll put these into our general plans. We'll look at these as we continue to develop, but don't make it a mandate that is far more painful than what it ought to be. In fact, we chuckled as city staff as we look through this list. We feel that we comply with vastly more of these. We suggested the 3 because from a compliance standpoint, we're required to do that. But even F, which Mike added to the list, in the DAP, we actually meet this. Within the DAP, we can check that box. And it's really more of a question of how do things develop in our community. We have up to 54, 56 units of density within the DAP. It will meet most of these standards that are well within the requirements and the menu list that's there. Again, we're trying to take and say we feel these menu items are appropriate, and in 2 years when we have to revisit this again, maybe there's a project in the DAP that's utilized some of these other tools, and we can check that box and say, look, we've met that standard. So again, I appreciate what Mike and Zions has done. From a compliance standpoint, we feel that this is a very compliant report. We still believe that it gives you the tools and the choices that you can make, and it certainly has to comply with what our residents have demanded with the referendum and initiative that they've given us. But we must comply with the state. This is part of that compliance, and we feel that this is a good step for us to consider.
I'm good that we've checked the box, we've done compliance, appreciate the recommendations. I know that we have good staff, we'll consider those as the right opportunity comes forth. So we're not like overly reactive or overly, dismissive or overly aggressive in trying to implement these things. So Mayor, unless there's other comments, I'd love to move.
Just real quick, one thing that we might want to do as council is, as we're looking at tracking, because we can't track a lot of that right now, is as you're going in and we do get the accessory dwelling units, that's going to be a little bit easier because they'll have to go through the CP process or the conditional use permit process at this point. But also even in roommate type situations, if you're renting to other people, get a business license so we can track it, so we know when you're renting. And it could be one of the free ones or whatever else, but somehow so we can track it so that we can have those numbers there.
To count towards.
So we can count those.
Actually, I've already talked with Brian about making part of the fields that we're tracking, Prop 6 and Prop 3. Part of what we're already doing is looking at how we can incorporate this analysis into there so that we can just have a running total and kind of a live update based on, the assessed values and other things. And so it's really, what they've given us is the methodological platform that we can actually just build into a live GIS scenario. So for us, again, I don't like to do work twice, so we're going to take this and use that as a springboard into just our ongoing tracking so that our attempt would be to just spit these things out based on zoning and the mathematics that go into this.
It's a good idea.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve business item 3.
Second.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden, a second from Councilman Porter. Any further discussion on the motion? McComber?
Was there any staff conditions or findings at all on this?
No, they're all different.
Okay, thank you. No other further discussion.
Okay, McComber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Podesta?
Aye.
Motion
you for
passes
your work.
unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, award of professional services contract for Redwood Road Landscape Restoration, Resolution R19-64.
We only had one responsive bidder on this, and it was only partial. So we asked to table this item until we have a better response for you.
So moved.
I have a first from Councilwoman Bartz, second from Councilman Porter. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mark, I do have a question. Have we got any follow-up from the UDOT about the asphalt instead of cement on Pioneer Crossing?
Let me make a note and get back with you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Code Amendment, Title 19.
Mayor, sit here, I'll be scrolling through some documents on here. It'll be a little easier to do it from this position. On the screen you see here, we got a bunch of amendments proposed. I can open up the document. We can go section by section. We can bring up whatever ones you have questions on. I'd like to bring up the two that were brought up by public comment earlier, at least. But however way you want to proceed, let me know. Okay. These highlights are kind of notes that I did just for discussion points here, where either typically was planning commission issues. On the office warehouse flex, they gave you a recommendation of no percentage of office or retail in a flex building. They recommended actually that they permitted that type of building. Typically, you don't specify a certain type of building in a particular zone. There are instances where it's done. For instance, drive-throughs. A lot of cities will regulate what zones you can actually have a drive-through in. The reason being, proposing an office warehouse flex, perhaps that's not a type of building you want in a commercial zone. It's up to you. Lehigh does have something called heavy commercial, which Dave Johnson could elaborate on a little more if you have more questions on that, but that would be a very intensive commercial. Do you want to have that kind of building in any commercial zone? It's up to you. Right now, it's proposed that office, warehouse, and industrial. Going on from what D.R. Horton had commented earlier, this is some of the issues, some questions they had on this as well, dealing with their property. We had a developer talk to us about 2 stalls per 1,000 square feet. If you have office warehouse space for the warehouse area, that 2 may be a little high. Maybe appropriate to have more than 1 per 1,000. As far, go ahead, Dave.
Before we move on, I just need to give you a little background on some of this discussion. So in trying to find apples to apples comparisons for office warehouse, I talked to a few different developers who made recommendations of other cities to look at, even looked and am in touch with the developer back east, who has done several projects and is looking to Saratoga Springs, and I've talked to local developers and as well as peer cities. Long story short, none of them have any kind of percentage requirement for office in an office warehouse type space because they naturally will build what is necessary for their business. Now, how that 50% got squeezed in there was staff looked at the comparisons of Lehigh, and we weren't making an apples to apples comparison. So Lehigh actually has 3 commercial, if you don't consider like community commercial, neighborhood commercial, or industrial, commercial zones. So they have regional commercial, which is similar to our regional commercial, and then they have commercial, and then they have heavy commercial. Now, originally they only had 2 commercial zones, and they created this heavy commercial, or really they created this commercial zone because the apples to apples comparison for us is heavy commercial to office warehouse. That's the apples to apples comparison. They created this commercial zone, from what I understand, talking to their staff about 18 months ago, because they were getting so much tilt up office warehouse. They were trying to find a way to mitigate that, and so many developers bringing that in. And so they implemented this, but in talking to their economic development director, this 50% requirement for that's like lighter type office warehouse, there's no market for it. There's no real viable market for it. There's a few developers that have come in, but there's nothing that's really viable for it. So long story short, what I'm saying is there was no cities that we looked at that had any kind of percentage requirement on office or retail in an office warehouse zone. And the most that you see is up to about 20%, but naturally you'll see at least 10% within the zones without any requirements. So I just wanted to put that out there, that 50% requirement is not an apples to apples comparison for an office warehouse zone. So. And the 1 per 1,000 makes more sense than the 2 per 1,000 for office warehouse.
Right.
For the warehouse section, correct. Thank you.
So one discussion we had around this, it's not exactly this 50%, but we had talked about like having kind of like a 2-track system where if somebody wanted to develop it more office, like a more office-centric office park, office warehouse type use, or a more warehouse-centric, so that we'd have some ability, because the parking needs are different, and if you can say, well, it's all going to be warehouse, but eventually.
So that actually is addressed. So
Okay.
if it based on the percentage of office, there's a 4 to 1,000 ratio parking. Based on the percentage of warehouse, there's a 1 per 1,000, or it says 2 per 1,000.
Right, but the secondary use, I own an office, or I own a warehouse, it's 10,000 square feet, I've got, 10 stalls, and all of a sudden, I go out of business and I sell out to, a software developer.
Right.
And now they need 40 stalls, you can't go back and build more
Yes,
stalls.
actually.
We require a change of use permit.
Yes, exactly.
So you got to come back into the city and say, well, I want to do this use now. We look at, okay, is parking going to be sufficient? We have, various parking standards we can compare. Your new use come in and say, well, you're going to need, 50 more stalls than what was there now. That's not going to be compatible with what's there now.
Okay.
Right, precisely. So that, what that does is with the change of use, if say it's a warehouse that's been in there and now you have all of a sudden a startup tech company that needs, like you said, 40 offices, that change of use is going to trigger then that new parking requirement. So, yeah.
So on the screen here, this is what Chriselle from DR Horton brought up. If you look at the mixed residential zone and you look at a community plan or village plan, those have a lot of the same information in each plan. You'll get a lotting plan, you can get building elevations, you can get potentially site plans too. And so if you recall, a year and a half ago or so, we made the code change to say, well, if you're going to show the subdivision plat, the lotting plan or a site plan in the community plan, staff, you can approve it because we basically seen the backbone of what's going to be there. Same thought then now carried over to the mixed residential zone. If you show the lotting plan, if you potentially have a site plan, staff can look at that because you're going to have standards built into it anyway we'll have to compare it to. Now what DR Horton's question is what's highlighted here in yellow. That's the language they would like to see added to it. Now there could be some legal issues of, well, what's substantial? That could be different to anybody. And coming from, Kevin Thurman can pipe in here now about is that term feasible to use or not, or what issues do we have if we do use that term?
Well, yes, so that, substantial, I don't have a mic on. Substantial is a subjective standard, so that's gonna cause problems if someone challenges one of your decisions made with that substantial language. What's that better? Well, one of the recommendations I made to David was to propose some alternate language. I don't think I see that in the packet. We could borrow language from the major and minor amendment language in the community plan that does discuss or lay out some standards, what would constitute a major versus minor amendment.
We could adopt that into there if that's your direction.
It would be a little bit, we'd have to tweak it a little bit we'd have to tweak it, but it talks about a major amendment is something that significantly changes the character architecture of the community plan. Major amendment would also include an increase or reallocation of residential density and non-residential density, a material reduction in the amount of land dedicated to parks, trails, open space, et cetera, and modifications to the development standards and as allowed in the community plan. So that's an example. It's not completely apples to apples, but that is something that we could incorporate into this language.
Still dealing with, let's go back here. Well, we have an office warehouse definition. Again, we could take that 50% out, but I think we still need to have this definition for two changes that are proposed. One is right here for site design standards general. Working with a few different developers, this issue has come up. One would be adding, generally parking has to be the side and rear of buildings. That doesn't make sense when you have development in the waterfront buffer overlay. You don't want parking to the side or along the river. You want buildings along the river. The code, the waterfront buffer still right now requires that when you put a road there, the road has to go, or the units have to go between the road and the river. Doesn't make sense. You want to put units there. You don't want to put parking behind a building, a residential building, for instance. You want to keep that parking away. You want to take that advantage of the river for those units. The other one then be for office warehouse. Typically office warehouse developments, the backs of those buildings are all loading docks, not suitable for parking for customers or employees. Sure, could it be worked in? Probably, but most likely it doesn't seem to fit. So it makes sense that if you do an office warehouse development, that the back would be the loading docks and the parking that would be in the front of the buildings. Again, these are exceptions. There are already exceptions written in the code now. We have 3. This would be adding 2 more to that. So we still need to kind of define what an office warehouse flex building is for this purpose. And here, typically also office warehouse.
The parking situation?
Yeah.
We're saying that they can't have any stalls, only loading in the back?
No, it'd be up to them how to design it, but generally those types of
You would
buildings.
just say that the majority should have the parking in the front, is what
Right.
we're saying. We're not saying that they have to have all public parking
Right.
in the front.
Currently, we require it to be in the back, we're waiving that requirement.
Primarily to the side and the rear is what the code says.
So, okay, so then
No,
now we're saying that putting in the front makes more sense. So we're actually taking down, because it doesn't make sense. You should be able to put the parking where you think it's going to be the best for your business.
Yeah.
Because like the pool A is a few spots in the back, over in there, you know what I'm saying? The majority for the public in the front. So
Yeah.
as long as we're making it
We've
easier.
got a rezone that's going to come to you here shortly based
So
on.
as long as it's making it easier.
Yeah, what happens tonight, that you could have a, 60 or 70,000 square foot, flex building, which in a sense really acts as a big box.
Yep.
Big box right now says you can pull all your parking in the front. Now, in that big of a building, is there going to be full loading docks in the back? Maybe there won't be.
Yeah.
But this just gives that option because, in those types of buildings, if you go, a good example is you drive in Lehigh along I-15, you see all those office warehouse flex buildings there. A lot of those have a retail component in the
They do,
front.
they do.
And so that's where customers go.
Okay, thank you.
And so the definition also for this, here for the architectural design standards, a lot of the office flex buildings are concrete tilt-up. Of course, that's all one material. So this here would say, in the code right now requires that any facade of a building, you can't have more than 75% of one material. So this amendment here says if you're going to do the office warehouse flex, you're exempt from that 75%, but you still have to meet all the other requirements of facade changes, roof line changes, colors, that sort of thing. But it would only apply to an office warehouse flex building.
That makes sense.
And looking online, it's a lot of office warehouse, like not just a box anymore. They have a lot of varying designs and architectural features on them. It's not.
So Dave, while we're there, the one just before that, the normal of 50%, this is something that we talked about with Costco and some other areas. So this is not four-sided architecture, no more than 50% on the front and sides. Four-sided architecture is four sides. So they should be all equal. So this needs to be changed. This is something we've talked about changing, and it's not changed yet. So we just need to change this, and we can do it now. We've got it in here.
Yeah, part of your motion,
So,
absolutely.
And that's, again, not for the office warehouse, that's for the commercial office.
So that we have 0%, the one stall per thousand for warehouse.
So my question, and I totally makes sense to allow the office warehouse, this exemption. But as you said, many, if you look at the tilt-ups that they're putting up along Mill Pond and stuff like that, they do have a lot of architectural, they're actually quite nice-looking buildings, many of them. In the front. But how do we encourage that without requiring it, I guess is the, I would like, there's always going to be the one guy that comes in and says, they don't require me to do anything except concrete, I'm only doing concrete. How do we encourage them to, or do you think that the current code does enough to encourage them?
Well, like I said, you still have to meet other standards of, roof line
Color
changes, color changes. Two is the color. I don't know if Shelley has any ideas based on her comment of a few minutes ago. But, yeah, we could tighten up some other architectural standards.
I'm happy not, allowing them to do what they want to do, but I would like to say, look, we would like it if you don't just throw up
Yeah,
four
and as far,
walls of concrete.
yes, and if we keep it tied to certain zones in this case, that still stays in the code, office, warehouse, or industrial. One, I think we probably all agree, we're probably not gonna have much in the way of many industrial areas in the city. It's just the way we're built out now, there's just not a logical place for a true industrial zone. So our emphasis is probably going to be the office warehouse. And with that, we probably won't have a lot of that either. We're losing some of it now to Lehigh, the property they're taking up below the canal. That was slated for office warehouse. We lose that.
Right.
About the
Well,
only place.
and my concern is because of that, a lot of these are going to be adjacent or close to
Right,
residential. And, whereas if it's in an industrial zone, four walls of concrete, bare bolts poking out, I don't honestly care, whatever. But if it's across the street from somebody's house, they're not gonna wanna necessarily see the full extent of what is possible.
So if I can add something, Councilmember Porter, so a couple of the developers that I've been talking to and working with, and I've done site visits with on some of their projects, do go above and beyond in both facade and landscaping than your typical guy who's just going to throw up the bare minimum.
Right.
And both of these developers have offered to, and some of them have already given feedback on some of these other items and have offered to do that as well, because they recognize that, especially with like the tech startups and some of these different uses that aren't the typical uses of the past, they have to have nice-looking buildings. And so I think they could provide us some good feedback on what they feel would be sufficient, but not overbearing.
Overburdensome, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I'm asking is because, I think that's the majority we're gonna get. However,
There's
these
always
these
that
two
one guy,
developers,
yeah.
there's nothing in this that says these are the only two developers that can develop in our city.
Right,
So-
sure.
And
But
the code's
it-
written for the
but
one
it's
who's
a-
going to do the minimum.
It's a nice sounding,
Right.
it's a good sounding board from a developer's perspective and kind of creating that balance. And like Dave said, there are other things already in place that kind of help balance that. We'll just kind of,
As
Do
I
touch
would
base.
just reach out and see if there's suggestions they
Yeah,
can bring
definitely.
to help us do that.
thank you.
Other than that, are there any other changes I want to speak to specifically?
No? Okay. You ready to make a motion? Okay. We'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move that we approve the Code Amendment Title 19, City Initiated Ordinance 19-38, goodness, dated today, including all staff findings and conditions, changing the percentage of required office in the office warehouse area to 0, or removing the requirement, I guess I should say, changing to 1 stall for the 1,000 square feet of office warehouse space.
Just the warehouse
Or the
space.
warehouse part of the office warehouse space, yes. And then also changing to all 4 sides of architecture, having only 50% of, I guess I should say, let me rephrase that. That third one is 19.16.07.1.2 DI, removing any front or street side to just say any building elevation.
Okay, so that makes it four-sided.
So that makes it 4-sided.
Okay.
Okay, I have a first from
I'll second.
Councilwoman Barch, second from Councilman McComber. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just, go ahead.
Do you have a comment?
Quick clarification. We were talking about the substantial item and we suggested
Oh, yeah, we
doing
didn't talk about
something
that.
else.
The major
Thank you.
and minor amendments.
So I would amend that then to add language that staff puts in for
That
major,
mirrors major and minor amendments.
for the substantial area that was
I'm
mentioned.
going to work with Kevin.
Which section was that?
That was,
You're not that sleepy.
There you go, 1904.
1904,
I was
13.
paying
Okay.
attention.
I thought Stephen was half asleep over here, but he caught that one.
Okay.
can I just,
So
Fully asleep.
amended first.
Okay,
Sleep with
amended
his eyes
first.
open.
And amended
Amended
second.
second.
Can I
Any
just get-
further discussion?
yeah, can
So
I get a
do we not-
clarification?
Yes,
Yeah, so Councilmember Barch, so you wanted to remove more than 50%? No.
It's down just above the table.
Doors, yeah, the
make sure
big,
they're on the back.
right, that they can't be street facing. Because
I told you,
Asking
they're
for more regulation.
good recommendations.
Gonna amend that motion.
experienced developers aren't going to build that kind of product because it doesn't lease, it doesn't hold its value, it's not what people want. You see some of that stuff, and a lot of it is legacy product that was built, 20, 30 years ago before we really got architects and engineers and builders on board with looking at the product more long-term. And that's what we've got today. And again, it's just a matter of economics. You'll get higher rents for the nicer space, which helps justify the prices that developers have to pay
For the
in
land.
Saratoga Springs.
Got it.
It's something that works together, not separately.
Next step is we're doing the use table.
Okay,
And that will help move it in that direction. So-
perfect.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
So if it's okay with council, I would like to make one more amendment to the motion. That would be to add that we don't allow street-facing loading docks
Loading doors.
Loading doors.
Public street or private street? It'd have to, public street, we want to make sure it's specified
Streets.
public.
Yeah,
Right.
they have to have
Yeah,
internal
Right,
streets.
just want to make sure it says public, though.
That's good.
I'll amend my,
The opportunity for us to move forward with this. Thanks.
I move to approve resolution item 6.
Second.
We have a first from Councilwoman McComber, second Councilwoman Barch. One of the last few ones you'll be able to do.
Any findings and conditions?
Any further discussion?
Was there staff conditions and findings in that? Okay, we're good then.
All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, Podeska. Aye. Porter. Aye. Wilden.
Aye.
Barch.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. I'll entertain a motion for the October 15 minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes from October 15th with all submitted changes.
Second.
I have a
Can
first.
Sorry, can I make one change? Sorry,
This could be additional comment, yeah.
I forgot to read it earlier, and I was just, on line 93, it says the bottom plan. I just think it should be the underlying plan, because I'm not sure what a bottom plan is, so.
It's like
Just change bottom to underlying.
Okay, with
the
the
bold section.
additional submitted change from Councilman Porter.
Okay,
And
so
also the other changes from you, right?
I already said that earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
So I
second
have
set, not this
Amended second.
amended first and an amended second. Any further discussion? Porter. Aye. Barch.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
Do we have closed session?
Motion passes.